We need a scientific process by which we evaluate how much capital the RBI needs, and based on that, we declare a dividend.
Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan says he presented a scientific process to calculate RBI's excess capital, adds that the government did not reject it but wanted to learn more.
So far, we've actually not seen any impact on our business.
Infosys CEO Salil Parekh says the government shutdown in the US has not had any impact on the tech giant so far, but adds that if the stalemate is left unaddressed for too long, it could have some downstream impact.
CRISIL downgrades 2 special purpose vehicles of IL&FS to junk. ICRA puts 6 mutual fund schemes with exposure to IL&FS projects under watch. Sources say government will seek a special dispensation from RBI for provisioning.
Income tax officials meet tax professionals after a row over TDS notices. The two sides agreed to form a panel with representatives from professional bodies. The panel will make suggestions on how to tackle the current concerns.
Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant says government will soon come out with FAME 2, the second phase of the policy for faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles, adds that the policy will ensure initial subsidy for two-wheeler electric vehicles, another exclusive.
This is a serious plan.
No, absolutely serious. It will happen.
How much money are you putting?
Money in excess of $1 billion.
JSW Group bets big on electric vehicles, considers a German model for its EV foray.
Expect crude prices to remain between $60 to $80 a barrel in 2019, says the top team at IHS Markit. The International Energy Agency says $90 mark is a red zone for global economy.
Amit Shah kickstarts the BJP's election campaign in West Bengal, vows to uproot the Trinamool government, mocks the opposition rally in Kolkata, saying there were 9 prime ministerial aspirants on the stage. Trinamool hits back, says BJP is nervous and scared ahead of polls.
And Virat Kohli creates history, bags Sir Garfield Sobers Trophy, also named ICC Test and ODI Cricketer of the Year for the year 2018. A very, very good evening and thank you very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Kritika Saxena and Ritu Singh is joining me from the Mumbai studio. Ritu, it's been an eventful day. Watching those visuals of the World Economic Forum in Davos, you feel cold, yes, but it's exciting. Despite it being a slightly less eventful event this time around, it still has been exciting in terms of the conversation and in terms of what lies ahead. So let's get started. The first story that we have on the anvil for you is day one, as I said, of the World Economic Forum 2019. And the globe's richest and most powerful have congregated at the picturesque town of Davos in Switzerland. My colleague Shireen Bhan has been getting us exclusive interviews with the India Inc. captains, the top policy makers. She caught up with Raghuram Rajan to begin with, the former RBI governor earlier. Rajan feels that a scientific process should be put in place to decide how much dividend the Reserve Bank of India should pay the government. Rajan also clarified that the government did not reject his suggestions on accounting for capital but wanted to learn more. Here's that exclusive interview.
The Economic Capital Framework Committee met already in its meeting for the second time on the 24th to discuss the issue, the controversial issue of the RBI's capital reserves. Now, the former RBI Deputy Governor R. Gandhi has been quoted as saying that Raghuram Rajan had put forward a formula on the use of capital reserves, but that was not accepted by the government. What was this formula that you had shared with the government which was not accepted?
No, I'm not sure that there was a formula. There was a process by which we account for capital, which was actually one of the most modern processes, looking at value at risk and how much could be afforded and what we could therefore transfer to the government. And I think this is something other central banks have picked up. We were asked to make presentations elsewhere. It is something that offers a basis for discussion going forward, and it's something we should think about.
So what was it that you suggested to the government, and what was the response that you got from the government on this?
No, I think what we had suggested is we need a scientific process by which we evaluate how much capital the RBI needs, and based on that we declare a dividend, rather than negotiate this every year around budget time. How much do you need? How much can we spare, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Let's do it on a basis.
Do you believe that process is arbitrary somewhat?
Well, by its very nature, it's arbitrary because it's based on what the needs of the government are, rather than what the RBI needs in terms of maintaining its balance sheet strength and so on. So I would start first by saying here is how much the RBI needs to present a picture of health, because we need a strong central bank, and then anything that is excess should be paid over to the government. It is the government's. The RBI has no call to keep anything that is over and above that. The magic question, of course, is
what is that number? Yeah.
What is that number? And for that, having an objective process of deciding how much that is what Mr. Gandhi was probably referring to. We had a team within the RBI do the calculations, prepare the structure. This splendid young team, which essentially read the latest literature and put it together. And the question is that the basis for proceeding forward? It is state of the art in determining how much capital the RBI needs.
So was that taken forward at all in any form or fashion by the government in your conversations with them?
I think we had a discussion then. We put it on the table. The board at that time approved it in a sense of this is a basis for discussion going forward. The government at that point decided that they needed to learn more. So it wasn't that it was rejected. It was just that we never concluded on that.
So given the work that you did in the past and the fact that there is this committee that's looking at this issue, what should be the guiding parameters?
Well, it's up to the committee to figure it out.
No, but what would you suggest? I mean, what was it that you put on the table?
I think the committee will think very carefully about this. And I think the 2 or 3 big issues that it will consider first are that what is the appropriate level for the RBI to maintain a strong, healthy balance sheet, especially when it looks, when it's outward facing towards the rest of the world. The second issue is, okay, once you've decided this is a quantum that is excess, how do we actually pay it out? Because there's an accounting issue in whether you can pay out things that are not generated through profits, but that are generated through, for example, foreign exchange depreciation. And that accounting issue has to be dealt with because that is a constraint. And the third issue is how do you pay it out without monetizing a large part which you cannot really afford to given the liquidity conditions in the economy. All three have to be thought of. My sense is that previous people have opined the best way to actually pay out a large dividend to the government is to write off the bonds that you hold on your balance sheet of the governments. So the government's debt comes down and you don't monetize the process. That's something to think about, but that's more me speaking with my academic hat.
Well, let me continue to get you to speak using your academic hat. Arvind Subramaniam had said that you differed with him on the use of the capital reserves. His idea in the economic survey that he put forward was sort of a public asset rehabilitation agency or recapitalization of banks using the 4 lakh crore rupees, which he believes was excess capital. You differed with him on both these. Why?
Well, the public asset reconstruction agency, what people call the bad bank. My worry was that bad bank would be manned by government or public sector officials. And so you wouldn't solve any problem in terms of reducing the bad loans because it would go from the pocket of the public sector banks into the pocket of the public sector reconstruction corporation. Why would they have any stronger incentives to deal with the bad loans than before? So it seemed to me that this was just changing from one pocket to another, something we do often in the government in India today and in the past, and it's something that I don't think changes very much on the ground.
On recapitalization?
On recapitalization, it led to the very issue that we were just talking about. If the banks are granted this money, will they spend it? Will it lead to monetization? And he had some scheme for trying to ensure that it actually wasn't spent. To my mind, all these clever schemes can be short-circuited by simply saying, government, we owe you money, we have some of your bonds, we'll write off those bonds. And so your debt level, the government's debt level would come down. Now you figure out how much you need to borrow in the ordinary scheme of things. It also is the right thing to do because remember these surpluses have been built up over many years.
Yes.
It is what essentially belongs to governments over the years.
Yes.
And to that extent, by writing down the debt, you will create the conditions for this government to move on with, based on what it should have inherited from past governments. So if it needs to borrow more, it should borrow more, but that should be explicit and identified and as additional government borrowing.
There's been a lot of speculation that you're being courted by various political parties, and if this Mahabgatbandhan were to come to some sort of hope at being in power, that they might even consider you as finance minister. Is that something that you might even consider?
It's all speculation, but really, what number of us have been trying to do is put ideas into the system. Some of them are well-worn ideas, but I think we really need to think about how we take our country forward, that we are reaching the point where the old pace of growth is not enough. We need a new sort of revival, reinvigoration of growth. And what are the reforms that we need to do, the second or third set of reforms, to put this country on that growth path? That's something we need to think about very carefully.
So are these political parties reaching out to you for ideas and for counsel?
I talk with political leaders all the time.
Have you spoken with Rahul Gandhi recently?
I have spoken with Rahul Gandhi. Chandrababu Naidu and I were supposed to be on a panel here. So we talk with, I talk with whoever wants to talk to me. I spoke with Mr. Jaitley just 2 or 3 weeks ago.
But would you consider politics?
Look, I'm not a politician. I've said that many times. One of the important things in life is to know what your comparative advantage is. I'm a technocrat, I'm an academic. Those are the two areas which I know about.
And if you were called back to a position in India?
A hypothetical question. I don't answer that, but I really want us to think very carefully about what the next set of reforms need to be to take us forward.
And the biggest one that you would want to focus on?
Well, look, I think I've always said there's no magic bullet, that we have to do a whole bunch of things. And so some of the things we talked about, how do we improve the land acquisition process? How do we have a taxation system that generates adequate revenues? We have some new schemes. How do we work them out to make sure that the revenue collection is appropriate? Those are all things we need to think about.
Well, that's far from Davos. We bring you all our special interactions with several other business leaders later on the show. From the IT sector, we will have Infosys CEO Salil Parekh and Genpact CEO NB Tyagarajan. Also, we'll bring you interactions from the EV space with the Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant and JSW Group Chairman Sachin Jindal. Well, back home, here's the latest in the IL&FS saga. Ratings agency CRISIL has downgraded the bonds issued by Jharkhand Road Project's implementation on company to junk. Now, this in turn has increased the anxiety of bankers and mutual funds that have exposure to that company. In fact, ICRA has put 6 mutual fund schemes with exposures under watch. And Lata Venkatesh, who's been joining that story, joins in with the very latest. Lata, what does this downgrade now finally mean for the bankers and all the mutual fund investors as well?
Yes, CRISIL has downgraded the debentures issued by Jharkhand Road Implementing Company, which is an SPV, a totally owned subsidiary of IL&FS Transportation Network, which is a group company of IL&FS. This whole thing has happened, this downgrade has happened because Jharkhand Road Company told its trustee not to pay dividend from the escrow account. And why did it do that? Because on October 15, 2018, when the NCLAT passed an interim order, it's ordered a moratorium. Don't pay any interest amounts on all the subsidiaries until the restructuring of the parent company and the group company's loans are done. And hence, even the SPVs are not able to pay, although they have enough money and their amounts are escrowed. In a domino effect, rating agency ICRA has put under rating watch funds, debt funds of three asset management companies, three mutual funds. That's HDFC AMC, UTI AMC, and Birla Sun Life AMC. The expectation is that the problem is temporary, that as soon as a restructuring of the entire ALNFS group is done, these SPVs will be allowed to respect their loans and pay out the dividends. It is seen as a temporary pain as of now, and that's why we have not seen too much of chaos in the financial system. Additionally, of course, the government is also planning to request Reserve Bank not to demand provisioning against those loans which will turn bad, because the solution is expected in a few months. But we will have to really wait and see how the solution works.
If situation changes tomorrow, whether we will be reviewing it, yes, of course, we will be reviewing it, and as and when situation changes, as and when we get more clarity on legal issues around this instrument. And we'll be reviewing this rating within the boundaries of SEBI guidelines that is there. Our action is absolutely in line with SEBI circular that came in November 2016. So there's absolutely no, if you ask me, Lata, flexibility in terms of saying, okay, fine, some fund is available, let's go, absolutely no gray area.
In the interim between 15th of October and 11th of January, which is the last order from the NCLAT, parties actually applied to the NCLAT to be joined as interveners and to be heard by the NCLAT. So the NCLAT actually granted an order saying that any 5 members who are lenders can be joined in the proceedings. They can file their replies and they would be heard. That hearing is now coming up on 28th of January 2019. So this whole opposition or review or cancellation of the order of 15th of October is pending argument before NCLAT. They would therefore review the question as to whether this order needs change, this order needs withdrawal, or its order needs to be strengthened, depending on how the government of India argues the matter, because it's at the instance of the government that such an order has been passed.
Clearly, is the structure is weak? Absolutely no. As you rightly mentioned, there is enough cash flow has been built, including the DSRA, especially for serving the debt, both for principal as well as for the interest. There is absolute no weakness in the structure. Only the confusion which comes in, given the fact that NCLAT hearing is coming forth, and the banks seem to be having some different kind of view. At the end of the day, we are one of the parties who have been owning this instrument. And knowing very well these structures are well ring-fenced, there is absolutely no risk from the longer term point of view. Whatever the decision that is being driven, and both by the MC and the government, I am sure they would take into account the longer term, the interest of the bond market.
Well, staying with ILNFS, here's another CNBC TV 18 exclusive, which is the very latest from the ILNFS saga again. The Corporate Affairs Ministry has identified a few ILNFS subsidiaries which do have ample funds in their escrow account but are unable to service their debt. And now we learn from sources that the ministry is likely to approach the Reserve Bank of India seeking deferment of provisioning for these companies. Timsy Japuria has been tracking that story and joins us now with the very latest. Timsy, what are you picking up now? What is the MCA likely to tell the Reserve Bank of India?
Well, sources told CNBC TV 18 that after taking a detailed stock of the current ILNFS situation, Ministry of Corporate Affairs is now going to approach RBI and banks, trying to seek deferment of the provisioning norms for certain companies, certain subsidiary companies of ILNFS, which government has earmarked as amber category subsidiaries. Basically, these companies are those which have funds available in their escrow account but are still unable to service debt, and government feels that only with certain time lag these companies will be able to start servicing debt, and thus they now want this deferment of provisioning norms. Now, if you see the entire ILNFS case, there are about 170 domestic subsidiaries which have been divided into 3 categories. Green, where the debt servicing is going as per process, so government does not want to touch those companies at all. They want the business to continue as usual. Secondly, the the amber categories companies where the sticky situation lies, that the banks are unable to realize their debt. However, companies do have funds available in their escrow account. In this case, government now wants to step in, trying to give relief to banks, to creditors, so that once they speak to RBI, deferment of provisioning norm can be done so that banks are also at peace and they do not declare these companies as NPAs. And the third category, the red category, where government has already started red flagging concerns and they have already started inviting expression of interest to sell the assets of the company to start servicing debt. So all in, the entire situation of ILNFS could see a possible final resolution only in 4 to 5 months is what sources say. So let's see what finally happens after 3 to 4 months or 4 to 5 months to go by as per the MCA sources, whether the situation of ILNFS comes under control or not. We'll keep you posted on it.
Okay, Timsy, we'll keep having you back to get us updates on that. But let's move on to another critical story that we have been tracking all day today. The Income Tax Department has held a meeting with tax professionals after a row over TDS notices. Now, earlier reports had suggested that the taxman had sent notices to businesses over delay in TDS deposits on a large scale. However, the department had refuted those very reports. Today, key income tax officials met representatives from organizations of tax professionals to discuss the key concerns. Prashant Nair, who was tracking the meeting, is here and he is joining a special guest to help us understand the implications. Prashant, first take us through the takeaways of the meeting.
Well, there has been a lot of hue and cry about these prosecution notices which have been sent out to small, large, medium-sized businesses on withholding the TDS. I mean, essentially employees collecting TDS but not depositing it with the government. The acquisition has been made that the tax department is being overzealous and it's essentially, in a way, amounting to very harsh implementation of, tax laws. Which may be unnecessary in some cases, and it's using a very broad brush across the board for all kinds of cases. So there's been a fair bit of feedback on that. The tax department has also been issuing clarifications. We heard from CBDT yesterday about some numbers, about the number of notices which have been sent out as compared to the total number of returns filed, and how that is very small, minuscule. So the tax department making its point that all this hue and cry is actually unwarranted, and there is nothing of that sort going on. Today in Mumbai, and because Mumbai is such a high-profile tax zone in terms of tax collections, etc., the tax department in Mumbai called upon some professional bodies, bodies like the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, Chambers of Tax Consultants, All India Federation of Tax Practitioners, amongst many others. And they met these representatives. The Principal Commissioner of Income Tax Mumbai was attending that meeting. The Chief Commissioner Income Tax was in that meeting along with other IT officials as well. I've got somebody who was part of that particular meeting today. Sunil Gabbawala is President, Bombay Chartered Accounts Society, and he's joining us right now to tell us what really came out of that meeting. Mr. Gabbawala, thank you for your time. If you can tell our viewers what really happened in that meeting and what were the assurances given to you?
My pleasure, Prashant. Today, the Principal Chief Commissioner of Mumbai, Mr. A. Shankar, invited to refer to the recent press reports and the other aspects. But it was a generic notices being issued. And in a couple of cases, live examples were also shared to the Principal Commissioner. And when those live examples, a couple of them were shared, the Principal Commissioner did agree that while the law does have a process to make sure that genuine and small cases are not raked up, there could have been a couple of aberrations in this area. And therefore, of course, the Principal Commissioner was very proactive, and he did say that once those details are shared, he will immediately look into the matter and do the needful.
Mr. Gabbawala, were any numbers shared? I mean, because there have been all kinds of reports, right? Lakhs of these notices have been issued. I mean, were there any numbers which were put on the table at the meeting?
No, there's not a question of lakhs of notices being issued, because exact number is difficult to decipher. But yes, somewhere they said that there were in a few thousands. That was what was being discussed, but it's very difficult to vouch for a particular type of a number or a ballpark number in this type of a meeting. So not a lot of discussion was around the numbers. There was a general acceptance that while the power to prosecute should be there as a deterrent to have, black money avoidance and things like that. But at the same time, not even a single case of a genuine taxpayer should be harassed, and that empathy was visible in the discussion. And what ultimately it was discussed was that if we can set up a steering group amongst the professional bodies and suggest some type of an objective criteria to the tax department, they would consider that, and thereafter in the end of March they would have a second round of meeting. After we give the suggestions, then accordingly that will be taken into account, and then maybe some simplification in that direction can come up.
For our viewers, Mr. Gabawala, what does a prosecution notice entail? I mean, what happens after that?
So basically, what the law has a section called Section 276C, which permits prosecution to be initiated for certain types of defaults.
Sure.
And of course, there are varying ranges of defaults, and necessarily the law has to have the power. And there's no denying anyone as a society. We have not said that any offender should be left scot-free. And but the issue which was coming was there have been situations where some of these notices were issued mechanically, and that is where the society did represent to the government. And this is, we were happy that today there was a discussion around that point, and there is this movement towards setting up of a committee on that forum with some detailed objective criteria being set out. And maybe if those criteria are later on accepted and codified, it will help the smaller SSs avoiding these types of tax fear.
Absolutely. Mr. Gabawala, thank you very much for joining us, sir. And we'll be in touch with you to get the latest out of this one. So as Mr. Gabawala pointed out, the meeting has happened. A committee will be set up, which will recommend to the tax department to set up some objective criteria. Of course, we'll have to see what comes out of that. But as of now, the sense is that the sense in the business community, in the professional circles, is that the tax department, with of course the aim of revenue collection, has been a bit overzealous. We'll follow the story and get you the latest. It's back to you.
All right, Prashant, thanks for breaking that down for us and taking us through that discussion. But we'll have to get back to our coverage of the World Economic Forum. And here's an exclusive. The partial shutdown of the U.S. government has not impacted Infosys' American business so far. That's the word coming in from Salil Parekh, the CEO and MD of Infi. However, in an exclusive interaction with CNBC, Parekh added that if the stalemate is left unaddressed for too long, it could have some downstream impact on the company. Take a look.
So far, we've actually not seen any impact on our business. About 60% of our business comes from the US. And we've had good growth. We announced our results just a few days ago for the last quarter. A strong growth in the US, strong growth in financial services across all of the sectors. Of course, the work that's going on within the US and the concern with the slowdown, with the shutdown, will result in some impact downstream if it's not addressed at one stage.
And perhaps the concern is it's coming at a time where it's late stage growth in the United States. People are worried that perhaps there won't be an infrastructure plan because of the stalemate in Washington. As it pertains to your business going forward, are you already seeing any waning?
Now, in his interview with Shireen at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the NITI Aayog CEO also said that the government will provide subsidy for two-wheeler electric vehicles during the period of FAME 2. Here is his rationale on how that will work.
On the EV, sir, and this has been something that has been the stated objective of the government, but there's been a lot of back and forth and things haven't, in fact, moved forward. Now, you talked about electrification of two-wheelers, and I understand that that is the big push of the government. There have been meetings even as recently as December and January to try and see how that can be done. But, where do things currently stand? And you said in the past that you will not make it mandatory for people to transition. So what is the plan and the thinking now?
So a huge amount of work has been done on this. We've come out with green plates. We've come out with new regulations relating to charging. We've pushed for all the petrol pumps to have both charging as well as CNG within their intra-city. We have done away with permits on three-wheelers. So a huge amount of reforms have been done. But I think you'll soon have the FAME 2 and you will have a clear roadmap on...
When you say soon, sir, we've been waiting for a while now. When will FAME 2 be unveiled?
I think the Department of Heavy Industry is at its final stages. This is a very large scheme. This is a big one, and we have to be very careful that in the transition period, while we push for EV batteries, it's also important to understand that combustion vehicles in India contribute, automobile manufacturing contributes to 7.2% of India's GDP. It contributes to almost 30 million jobs in India. And therefore, we don't end up disrupting the combustion vehicle industry. We are looking at the additionality of manufacturing. We are looking at the additionality. And, because in India, the additional purchases which will happen in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the four-wheelers, and the bus, we are trying to push the buses from a capex model to an opex model. We're pushing for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And we are pushing in a manner where states become very key partners of Government of India in this effort.
Is the planned allocation for FAME 2 going to be larger than what was earlier anticipated?
Substantially larger.
How much?
Quite a big one. I think you'll have to wait for that. But a big jump forward.
A big jump forward from FAME 1?
From FAME 1.
Okay. And are you going to make it mandatory for a certain percentage of every two-wheeler maker's plans to include a certain percentage of electric vehicles?
Well, what our attempt would be, not mandatory, but our attempt would be that you ensure that the cost of an electric vehicle comes on par with combustion vehicle, at least for two-wheelers and three-wheelers.
So what will the government do to incentivize that?
That would be, like we've done away with permit, we'll do away with road tax. And we will ensure a certain amount of initial subsidization through the FAME industry. But the challenge there is to bring in size and scale. And that, to my mind, will happen.
So you will subsidize two-wheelers to start with? For a period of 2 or 3 years?
I think we are looking at the regime of the FAME 2, that would be about 2 to 3 years initial. So that we can get the size and scale, because without the size and scale, the disruption will not happen.
Staying with that EV theme then, Hero MotoCorp CMD and CEO Pavan Munjal has said that the two-wheeler major is preparing itself for electric mobility. Talking to Shireen in Davos, Pavan Munjal added that the industry needs government's help for this EV push.
On the EV side, and Mr. Kant, who was speaking with me a short while ago, said that the FAME 2 policy will probably be announced shortly, and the incentives will be given to two-wheeler manufacturers to push out EVs. How prepared would you be for that situation?
Let me say that on the EV front, it is something which is here to happen. And all of us are gearing up, preparing ourselves for electrification of our products. We're working at our R&D, we've invested in Aether, we're doing stuff with our associate design houses, whether it's in Italy or Germany or Spain. A lot of work is going on. But my wish is that the government comes up with a long-term policy, with a clear-cut policy where we know where we are heading and we are able to prepare ourselves for whatever is needed to be done. But we must know. We should not have ongoing changes in the policy. We must have a clear-cut policy, whether it's a FAME 2. Definitely the industry will need help from the government in electrification. The cost of the product otherwise is really very high.
What would be the kind of subsidy that industry would like?
Well, industry would like help on the cost to bring down the price that we are able to give to the consumer. Whatever is the cost today, that cannot be passed on to the consumer for sure. And we know that globally electrification is picking up pace. Many companies have already announced they will completely switch to electric products. Many countries have announced that. We also need a clear-cut policy.
And sticking to this theme, JSW Group Sajan Jindal is also betting big on electric vehicles. Talking to Shireen in Davos, Sajan Jindal said that the JSW Group is considering a German concept for its electric vehicle foray. Here is what he means by that.
There's a lot of talk around you tying up with Chinese manufacturers, etc.
No,
what's the story?
No. Chinese, we looked at, because China is very big on EV, and Tesla kind of stuff cannot work in India. It's too expensive, it's too high tech. So a Chinese EV is a very good model for India. So we looked at all those cars, and every Chinese company wanted to tie up with us. But we are not looking at Chinese because to sell a Chinese product in India is going to be a very difficult thing. And last coming from a JSW saddle. So therefore we did not, so we are looking at a German concept, and technology would come from Germany and or Austria, and that we would be doing it 100% JSW.
And manufacturing in India?
Of course, 100%.
Okay. So what is going to be the positioning of this electric vehicle, and when do we actually see it being commercialized? Because, you know, even companies like Mahindra who've had the first mover advantage continue to struggle in the Indian market.
No, I think there is still time for the electric vehicle to come into India, and because we don't have the infrastructure, still the technology is still developing. Because you know, when you come with the product, it must match the IC engine technology. You know, it must have that same acceleration. It must
and range.
And range. Yeah. So that's why. So we believe that in 2 to 3 years, the batteries will become very cheap, and the range will increase a lot. And I don't really worry about the infrastructure, because India, I always believe that India is a very, very different kind of a country, where the infrastructure will come as the product gets launched. For example, the aircrafts came before the airports were built in India, in the sense that, you know, and today we see Bombay, we are roaming around for half an hour congestion. So now new airport is being expedited, and new highways are being built. So that would happen.
So this is a serious plan.
No, absolutely serious. It will happen.
How much money are you putting?
Money in excess of $1 billion.
We learned from sources that Paytm Mall, that started operations in late 2016, has seen sales decline by $200 million in 2018 alone, and market share fall by almost half. And that's not all. We learned that sellers have now alleged that the company has asked them to ship stocks directly to the customers and not to Paytm's mall warehouse. Mugdha Varia is here with the very latest. Mugdha, you've been talking to your sources amongst the sellers. What are the issues that have been raised?
Paytm Mall, the e-commerce arm of the parent company of Paytm, has seen its sales fall, while it has also lost credible market share among e-commerce companies. As per exclusive data from Forrester Research, Paytm Mall's market share dipped to about 3% in 2018 from 5.6% in 2017. Industry sources say Paytm Mall's sales also fell in 2018 to about 800 million from over $1 billion in 2017. Now remember, this comes even as the company has been offering a lot of cashbacks on its platform, which saw its losses pile to about 1,700 crores in FY18 on a total revenue of about 700 crores. Now, some sellers on the platform say they have raised concerns of falling sales over the last few days, especially because they say the company has asked them to not send their stock to the warehouses, but to fulfill their orders directly with the customers. This, they say, is indicative of falling orders. Now, Paytm Mall did not respond to specific queries on the figures of GMV and market share, but said it did not own warehouses and that it offered fulfillment services through third-party players, and that merchants have always been responsible for their own logistics. Now, what is to be seen is whether the fall in sales will push Paytm Mall to focus on its B2B business, given that it launched its wholesale entity last year. Back to you.
Well, you know, Mugdha, there is consolidation across the industry, so Paytm Mall has perhaps seen the brunt of that. Thanks for joining in with that, but let's get back again to our Davos coverage. Shireen caught up with some of the top voices from the energy sector at the World Economic Forum. Speaking to her, the top team at IHS Markit said that it expects crude prices to remain between $60 to $80 a barrel in 2019, while international energy agencies Fatih Birol said that $90 mark for crude is a red zone for the global economy. Here are the excerpts from those interviews.
Let's just talk about what we're seeing happen as far as commodity prices are concerned, and specifically crude. And we talked about 2018 and the kind of volatility that we've seen. What's the broad outlook now, given what the US is being able to do on the production side and balancing that with the production cuts from Russia and OPEC?
It is going to be the reactivity between the two of them. I mean, the U.S. is going to continue to grow. The U.S. will probably add 1.5 million barrels of supply this year. India will be importing more energy from the United States than it has in the past, and the other producers will have to adapt to it. What happened in October wasn't very well known, but the United States became the world's #1 oil producer. That was a big thing to have happen, and it's going to continue. And so the others are responding to it. When we look at demand, this goes back to talking about China growth, talking about world growth. We look at demand, we see it growing about 1.5 million barrels a day this year, and that entire growth could be taken care of by the United States. So there's going to be a kind of, I guess we'll say, a continuing dialectic between the growth in the U.S., how producers in the U.S. respond to price volatility, and what the exporters do, because of course as they cut to try and sustain prices, that also is a license to domestic U.S. producers to step up, put their foot on the gas.
So what would be the floor and what would be the ceiling?
Well, I think that the range, I mean, we've seen prices above and below, but it seems that it sort of would be within this $60 to $80 range. Last year, with all of the volatility up and down, the average price for Brent was $71 a barrel. So we're expecting this year will be in the high 60s. But some of these factors we've been talking about, the trade battles, what happens to economic growth, what's really happened to China, will certainly have a big impact. But we are going to see more supply from the U.S. also because some of the bottlenecks that have kept U.S. production from flowing into the world market, those bottlenecks are going to be eliminated in 2019.
And I think what Dan said just reinforces the earlier point on demand and the issues between China and the United States, because that fundamentally will have an impact on global economic growth and demand and will affect everybody. As Dan said, there's going to be enough growth in U.S. supply just to meet the business as usual projection on demand growth globally. So if you have a collapse in demand, we're going to find ourselves in a situation that really is potentially pushing down the price of oil, and that's something that everybody's going to be looking out for. What happens in those trade negotiations, and what does that mean for commodity prices? What does it mean for equity prices?
Given that the U.S. is going to exert downward pressure on prices and OPEC and Russia upward pressure on prices, what's the kind of band that you expect prices to move within?
I think I see the floor price today is about $60, but if it goes much higher, like we have seen last year, close to $90, this is for me a red zone for the global economy, already weak. It can be even weaker with the higher oil prices, so therefore we all have to act responsibly, producers and consumers, not to shake the global economic growth much stronger than it is now.
Now, Amit Shah kick-started the BJP's election campaign in Bengal today. Addressing a rally at Malda, Shah promised to uproot the Mamata Banerjee government from Bengal. That's not all. He also mocked the recently held opposition rally in Kolkata, calling the Mahagathbandhan an alliance of greed and dishonesty. The Trinamool Congress, meanwhile, hit back at Shah. Party MP Derek O'Brien said that the BJP was nervous and scared ahead of polls.
ये सत्ता और स्वार्थ का गठबंधन की रैली में भारत माता की जय का जयकारा नहीं लगता है, वंदे मातरम के नारे नहीं लगते हैं। क्या देश का आप भला करोगे आप बताओ। हम चाहते हैं गरीबी हटाओ, वो चाहते हैं मोदी हटाओ।
After listening to the BJP president's speech in Malda, it's quite obvious that the BJP are nervous, poor in taste and low on facts. They don't understand the ethos and the culture of Bengal.
Virat Kohli has scripted history. The Indian cricket team captain has become the first player in the history of International Cricket Council Awards to be crowned the Test and ODI Player of the Year. That's not all. Kohli was also adjudged the year's best cricketer. Moreover, he has also been named as the captain of the ICC Test and the ODI teams of the year. And Kohli was not the only Indian to win the top honours. Rishabh Pant, India's 21-year-old wicketkeeper, has bagged the Emerging Player of the Year award.
Well, it has been a good 2019 so far for Indian cricket lovers and Virat Kohli, hasn't it? But we are completely out of time on this edition of India Business Hour. Our coverage of Davos Day 2, that is the World Economic Forum Day 2, will continue tomorrow. So we'll be back bright and early. But from Ritu, me and our entire team of India Business Hour Plus, thank you for watching. Have a good night.